Negroes in America 20,000 years ago. The modern historians tell us that the Negroes were first brought to America over 300 years ago to work as slaves. But further research have found that Negroes inhabited America something like 20,000 years ago, and further show that they were the first Americans and not the Mongolians crossing the narrow passage of water at the Bering Strait to Alaska. The Negroes were always here. They were aborigines of the continents of the Americas, and also the ancestors of the American Indians. They did not come by migration. They were on the continent of South America when it was rent asunder from Africa at the time of the flood. A. Brigham, in his book, The Shadow of the Atlantis, page 140, says, the fact that the existence of black races among the inhabitants of the lost continents mentioned in the Codex Popul Vuh, the sacred book of the Mayas, is of greatest interest. Hitherto, ethnologists imagine that Negroids appeared in the New World during our own epoch. But most recent researchers demonstrate that they came to America in a period very remote. Mr. Brigham further states that it is not impossible that in the present African black populations, the descendants of some Atlantean black-skinned tribes still exist. Brigham supports his argument such noted authors as Quadrophagus, La Plongeon, and Bancroft, of whom he says have proved that certain Aboriginal Negro tribes have inhabited America not so very long ago. Some statues of gods in Central America possess Negro features, and certain historic monuments there undoubtedly represent Negroes. He further asserts that such statues in Teotihuacan, in Palenque, and a gigantic Negro statue carved in granite near the Mexican volcano of Taxila. I have seen a statuette of a Negro in the archaeological collection of Mr. Ernesto France in Quito, Ecuador. According to the opinion of archaeological, the statuette is at least 20,000 years old. But in a very remote time, Negroes were numerous in the New World. Numerous. A. D. Quadrophagus, professor of anthropology of the Museum of Natural History in the University of Paris, says in his book, Human Species, page 200, black population have been found in America. Such are the Cherokees of Brazil, the black Caribbees of St. Vincent in the Gulf of Mexico, the Jamaica of Florida, the dark complexion California. Such again is the tribe which Balbo saw some representatives in his passage of the Isthmus of Darien in 1513 that there were true Negroes. There is a tribe of Negroes in Brazil that is called Chamacas, and some consider these Negroes to be an autochthonous American tribe. They even have their own language. Brigham's Shadow of Atlantis, page 38, says, the Cairo tribes in Kansas and the Californians are very dark. Professor Ratzius considers that all primeval duocephalic tribes of America are very related to the Guanches of the Canary Islands and to the races which inhabit the shores of Africa. Donnelly, in his book Atlantis, page 175, speaks of the gigantic Negro statue at the palace near Tuxedo and says of the features that the face was strongly Ethiopian. But Mr. Donnelly strives to make it appear this Negro statue was a slave, because Negroes, he says, were never a seafaring race. But he falls ridiculously short of the goal of his argument. Monuments are not erected to slaves, but only to gods, kings, and heroes. The duck-billed Indian women in jungles of South America stretch their lips when young, in the very similar custom to the duck-billed women of Ubanga tribes in Africa. John F. Ferris, in his book, Seeing South America, page 44, says, the jungle Indians have a method of rapid communications with one another that is like that described by travelers in parts of Africa. Signals are given by beating on a 6-foot tree hollowed by fire, a rude drum whose voice proves effective. Those who would hear the message must place their ears on a like drum. The radio of the jungle can do its work. This goes to show that the American Indians are the direct descendants of African Negroes. The Africans have had their radio drum for ages. Their language or dialect resembles that of the Gold Coast of West Africa. Pritchett, in his book The Natural History of Man, page 410 and 411, quotes La Perouse on black Indians and compares them to the Negroes in the West Indies. He says, the color of these Indians, which is the same as that of Negroes, a variety of circumstances, and indeed everything that we observed, presented the appearance of plantation in the island of St. Domingo. He continues, it seems from this description that color is not only circumstance in which the Californian makes an approximation to the character of person prevalent in some other tropical countries, West Africa, and the island of the Pacific. From an editorial in the Ethiopian World monthly publication, African Negroes discovered America before Columbus, November 1940. The black race comes down from a civilization that it need not be ashamed. We are not an inferior race, but it is a misguided race, miseducated and misinformed, which give it the inferiority complex. The black race has one of the richest heritages in history. Recent exploration and documents of neglected history has thrown much light upon the master achievements of the African Negro, which is a fact that reads stranger than fiction. The book Africa and the Discovery of America by Leo Weiner, a Harvard professor who speaks more than 20 different languages and dialects. The book was reviewed in the World's Work magazine and Literary Digest, and other leading periodicals say that Columbus found that America had been discovered by Negroes on second arrival in this hemisphere, that he also found Negroes living in South America. They told him that their ancestors came here from the Southeast Africa and carried some of them back to Spain with the Indians and presented them to the court of the king and queen of Spain. Professor Weiner also claims that sweet potatoes, peanuts, and tobacco were brought from Africa by the Negroes who taught the Indians how to cultivate them. Another book, titled The Hand of God in History, sustains these claims that the African Negroes discovered America before Columbus. But the Spanish, being eager for honor, kept it a secret. The ancient ruins of the Mayan civilization, the pyramids of Mexico, are identically the same as found in Egypt. The monument's pure Negro features thick lips and flat nose. These monuments were not slave monuments. They do not erect monuments to slaves. Ancient Egyptians were African Negroes. We know that modern customs have claimed the Egyptians to belong to most any other race than Negro, but we have facts to prove that they were 100% pure African blacks. The ancient Egyptians descended from the Ethiopians and built the first world's greatest empire. The Egyptians claimed their descent was from Ethiopia, a branch of the Ethiopian race. There's a correction here. The Egyptians, oh, that's all right. The ancient Egyptians descended from the Ethiopians. All right, that's correct. Harris' historical research on African nations says Thebes, as well as the states in general, Upper Egypt was called in proper annals of priests. Colonists from Meroe in Ethiopia and at Thebes service of Jupiter. Ammon, whose temples were common centers of the state, gives of itself a striking proof that such was the case. The other cities of Egypt likewise derived their descent directly or indirectly from Ethiopia. Robert Hartman, scientist and historian, says that the Egyptians were the genuine children of Africa who stood indisputable physical relation with the race of the continent. Africa has written her history in monuments. The Sphinx has the face of an African woman, thick lips and broad nostrils, which to show to all the world that a black pharaoh ruled the delta at the time of its erection.